What's up, everyone? My name is Joe LaLeune, and welcome to the Three Phase Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dennis Joyce, better known as Laxdad, one of the clearest voices in college lacrosse recruiting. I brought him on because recruiting has become loud, emotional, and expensive, and most families are operating with the wrong information. Even if you're not in lacrosse or recruiting at all, this episode is about something bigger. Making smart, long-term decisions under pressure instead of reacting to hype. There's a moment in this conversation when he says,
if you're being noticed by people who you can't play for, it doesn't have any value.
That line alone reframes the entire recruiting conversation. And wait until you hear what he says about the biggest mistake families make with early commitments. If you care about clarity over chaos, this one matters. And now let's dive into the episode.
The Three Phase Podcast is starting now.
Dennis, welcome to the Three Phase Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have a good conversation today.
I think we will. Do you mind giving us a little bit of background on how and what got you interested in starting this social media page and kind of giving some of that information out?
So I have been very lucky in my life to have three children who have taken my wife's athletic ability and have chosen to play lacrosse. And they have all one's done with college and played college lacrosse. One is in college playing lacrosse at the D1 level, and my youngest son is committed to play next year college lacrosse. So that's why I'm in it. I personally did not play lacrosse, so the Laxdad recruiting is truly what it is. It's me as a Laxdad trying to figure out all the nooks and crannies of this process. And why did we start it? Really easy. I was answering all these questions anyway. So I got to the point where I was like, you know what? Why don't I answer them once? And that way I won't have to continually say the same thing over and over.
Good thinking.
So that's where we came out of.
Well, first of all, congratulations on having three kids all go through the process and get to schools, which is a feat on its own.
Thank you.
And congratulations to your wife for her athletic ability. Yeah. That's great. So when families first enter the recruiting process, what do you think they misunderstand most about how college lacrosse recruiting actually works?
There are so many things that they misunderstand. And I think that's the biggest problem we have is they don't, first off, I think the biggest one is they don't understand how good or how bad their kids are. They don't understand where they are ranked, and they don't understand how hard it is to play at the next level. And as a result of not understanding those two things, they're really not able to focus their energy and their money and their time on the places where they're most effective. And that's what I see the most is, I think I answer, let's say 100 or 200 direct messages a week from kids and from parents. And I would say 90% of them all say the same thing. I can play mid-level D1. Like, no, you can't. No, honestly, you can't. And again, when you don't understand where you fit in the hierarchy and where, how hard it is to play at these levels, you end up chasing dreams instead of trying to go after the real reality. There's a lot of places to play lacrosse in college. There's a lot of colleges, a lot of levels between the three NCAA levels, JUCO, MCLA, NIA. There are so many places where you can play lacrosse, and I see people focusing on just a small little crevice of the environment. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, it's super fascinating too, because I feel like it's people only really see the top end, maybe their exposure to it is like in the Final Four, and you sort of get a chance to see all three divisions of the NCAA league. But when you look at all the variety, even like club teams and stuff that are available, there's a huge span of what skill levels and athletic abilities are available to the span of lacrosse as a sport.
I to just jump on that a little bit, we had two young men from my local high school who played with my youngest son, who went to University of South Carolina and are playing club lacrosse down there. I'm going to tell you right now, that MCLA, that higher level MCAA lacrosse is fantastic lacrosse. And you get the full experience of being at a big, in this case, SEC school. It is an experience that I think a lot of people just don't realize exists. And it could be the perfect fit for people, but we have such tunnel vision as parents and as players. It's the ESPN effect, it's the inside lacrosse effect, where we just don't recognize the fact that there are so many options out there. And my son played Division III lacrosse, and I'm going to tell you, my daughter plays D1 right now. My son played D3, and the D3 experience from a parent's perspective is fantastic. I was able to enjoy it a lot more. It's more intimate, there's smaller crowds, there's less involved. My son had a much better experience in college because he wasn't a working stiff, working for the university. So I think that if people can take one thing away from this is that if they open up their blinders a little bit and look at all the things out there, they can find some fantastic fits.
Yeah. And we'll get into more of that in terms of how to find those. But where do you think that misunderstanding comes from? Do you think it's like social media, other parents, or travel programs?
Can I say yes to all of those?
Yeah, all the above.
It's a combination. I think that I don't think that we've done the schools themselves don't do a very good job of kind of highlighting the fact that they have these great programs. The Division IIs, the Division IIIs, they just get drowned out by the noise. I mean, you'll get 10 stories about UNC before you'll see one story about any D3, much less ones that you actually heard of. So I think there's a lot of noise out there that just drowns out the other levels. So that's a big one. But social media, you're hearing announcements. Everyone, if you're a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid online today, everyone's going Division I, right? Every announcement, you never see anyone say, well, I had to go D3 or I'm going MCLA. It's always like, oh, I'm going to UNC, I'm going to Duke, going to Richmond. So I think there's just, you're not seeing the success stories at the other levels. So I think that helps. And let's be honest, the clubs aren't helping very much. I'll take that back a little bit. The good clubs are putting their kids in the right programs, and the bad clubs are selling dreams in order to make money. So there's a little bit of that noise also, where we're not really getting the focus that you should on the other levels. So there's a lot of noise. A lot of noise is drowning out all the opportunities.
Yeah, maybe a good comparable, like education-wise, is like a preparatory school they're really toting, well, we sent this many kids to Harvard and this many kids to Yale, not for sports, but for academics. And that's sort of like what they hang their hat on. And for a lot of these like prep sport programs, they're hanging their hat on, we sent this many kids to Division I, and that's kind of their sort of top tier of success when people they're signing in, and they're using that as sort of a recruiting methodology to get more people to sign up for the program.
100%. It's a marketing tool. My son played for Sweet Lax Upstate. A great program. They're excellent at what they do. I had a great experience with them, but they certainly use the success of the 26 class to make the 27 class better. It's a machine that kind of rolls downhill. So yeah, there's absolutely a marketing, money making perspective of that.
Hey, thanks for listening to the episode. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to remind you that you got discounts for Trainer Eyes, Bioptimizers, Whoop, and ATP Labs in the show notes. Okay, back to the episode. What usually surprises families the most once they're actually in this process?
I think a lot of parents, when they're, especially, I'm getting DMs from people who are like 30s, 2030s, 2029s. They're not in the recruiting process. They believe they are because they're hearing the hype. They're hearing you have to be at these events. So I keep telling them, I go, you want to be in the recruiting process so badly because you see all the success and the flowers and the social media posts, but it is actually miserable. The process is anxiety driven. It will drain your bank account, take away all your free time. It is not. When people get done with the process and you ask them, what was your thought before you went into the process, and what's the process when you got done, and they'll tell you it's completely different because it is rough. The process is rough, and a lot of people just get burned out by it. There's a lot of chasing dreams and a lot of running around. And even for the most successful kids, they're going to play, before their junior year, they're playing, 9, 10, 11 events in a 7-week period in 90-degree heat. It's draining physically, mentally, financially. That's probably the biggest thing. They just don't realize what they're going to get themselves into, and it can be, even for the most successful kids, it's hard.
Yeah, a lot of commitment there. How early do you see panic start to creep into the process? Like with people reaching out to you, or parents you run into on the sidelines. What's maybe the earliest you've seen that panic start to creep in?
You know what? I wish I could say that it's people who are actually in the recruiting process. And so let's kind of frame that for people listening. The recruiting process technically starts on September 1st of your junior year. But we start really like 6 to 8 months before that, as people kind of play in tournaments and get viewed and everything else. So, that's the time frame. So right now the 27s are being looked at and the 28s are on deck. I'm getting notes from people who are 29s and 30s who say, I think I'm missing out. I'm not going to the right events right now. I'm really nervous that that we're not setting ourselves up for the recruiting process. And, my reaction is almost always the same, which is like, hold your horses, relax. No one is watching you. No one is watching you. Now, I will say this. If you are a 5-star, 6'4", 225-pound 13-year-old, you will get noticed. But you can stay in your backyard and get noticed. Yeah. But for everyone else, there's a lot of panic way too early in the process. Now, for kids who are in the real recruiting cycle, you start seeing, normally it used to be you see people start panicking. If, say, the 27 class, they start panicking nowish, where they're like, we got past September 1st, I didn't get any calls, and they start getting nervous, and the reaction is like, hey, you got a whole summer still ahead of you. All the D3s and D2s are still looking for players. It's not a big deal. But, the real panic comes in when you get to August and kids haven't found homes, and then they start really panicking. But unfortunately, we're seeing that creeping earlier and earlier in this process, and it's terrible. It's horrible.
Do you think that has any crossover from other sports, like especially like European soccer, where they're identifying players when they're 8 and 10 years old, and there is no boundary really on how early they start to look for and start developing these players? Do you think there's like a bit of creep in from other sports where people just want to be found sooner?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, my oldest is old enough to be in that recruiting classes when they were getting recruited in 8th grade. When they were committing kids to college in 8th and 9th grade. And I think a lot of people, there's a good portion of people who would love to go back to that in some kind of weird, horrible way. Yeah. Because they don't understand how detrimental that was. They want to get noticed. And the clubs leverage that. And the private equity who run the tournaments and showcases are feeding into that. You have to be seen. You're not here. You're going to miss out on this great opportunity. So yeah, it's definitely all the things you mentioned, but we do not want to go backwards. We really need to get to the point where kids just are allowed to be kids until, the end of 10th grade, and then let them go through the recruiting process.
Yeah, it's kind of like a marketing strategy to like create scarcity or FOMO or, just fear of not getting identified early enough. But I'm sure like you probably would have seen it because you had a son in that age bracket. But that's so much pressure on a 8th grader to be like, I'm going to go to, wherever, UND, and be recruited by these guys and be ready. Like that's 5 years of anticipating landing on campus.
Yeah, I mean, how many 13-year-olds know what they're going to have for dinner tonight, much less know what they're going to study in college, and can pick a school based on anything other than the colors of the uniforms?
Yeah,
and that's
totally.
And that's why we start so many, decommits and commits other places. And some kids who got committed, and no one talks about this, but the fact that a lot of kids committed when they were 13 or 14, and then the coaches said, you haven't gotten any bigger, you haven't gotten any faster, your skills haven't gotten any better, and they dropped them. We don't hear that conversation, but I know personally a number of people who lost their spots at significant schools because, they were really good at 13, but they weren't really good at 17.
Yeah, no urgency to keep progressing.
Well, that's a big problem for everybody, but yeah, especially at that age, yeah. When you're a god and everyone's talking about you when you're 13, and you can't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can just stop developing, really. If you could reset expectations for families on day one, what would you want them to understand?
Oh, goodness. There's so many things. I think that that lacrosse is really important, but the education is 10 times more important. And if you had a choice, we go into school A, who is Division I, but the academics, and there are a number of schools out there, the academics are not as great, and you have D1 skills, but you can go to a solid D3, a NESCAC, a William and Lee, a really good academic D3. Yeah, sure. There's not going to be the scholarship, and there's not going to be as much swag and things like that, but you'll be so much better off at the end of it. And I think people really need to kind of assess what their goals are in this process. Why are you playing this game of lacrosse? I mean, the PLL is really nice, but no one gets rich playing in the PLL.
Yeah, and that's kind of always been the case with lacrosse. Has always been secondary careers or multiple jobs while playing, as a side sport. It's, slowly moving, but ultimately it doesn't really look like it has the trajectory to be a full-time, multi-million-dollar a year sport as an athlete. So you really have to have the other skills in place. And yeah, like you're saying, like if you're just going because that school's won championships in the past, or, they have all-star guys who've gone to that school, it's not much of a holistic approach to the person you're trying to become, not just the experience you're trying to have.
Yeah, and you'll see kids picking schools purely by their level. They'll say, I want to play D1. So I'll take and I'm not going to pick on any schools because they're all good schools for particular things you want to study. But, I'll go to this particular school because it's D1. Not because it has the best major or the best professors, or it has the right major, or it's in the right city, or it's the right size, or it's the whatever criteria. There's a lot of kids who I talk to who go, you know what I really want from college? And I'm like, what? He goes, I want to go to a big-time football game. And you go, you can do that. Like, yeah, but I'm not good enough to play at Ohio State or Michigan. I'm like, yeah, but you can go to South Carolina and play in MCLA and have a fantastic experience, and you still get So if you can identify as if you're a parent and you're talking to your kids, breaking down what they want. Like, when they get done, what are they going to be happy they did? And I can tell you from personal experience with my daughter, the swag they get, the piles of clothes and the jackets and the 10 pairs of shoes and all the stuff they get, it gets old. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're left with a school and, your friends. And hopefully you pick those for the right way. So
yeah, eventually the shine wears off. And,
everything.
And you don't want to be sold just on stuff.
Yeah.
So this flows perfectly into this fit question. So when you talk about fit being more important than the level or logo, which is what we were just talking about, what should players and parents really be evaluating? What do you think would be, sort of top tier and working down from that of what is going to make the right fit for someone?
That goes back to my checklist where all right, so you really need to break down what you want out of it, because there's a lot of people who don't know what they want. And I think parents are either really pushy, they really push their kids into a very particular niche, or they're like, hey, make the best decision you can. And I don't let my own children make the decisions on their own because they're dummies. And my kids are smart, but they're 16, 17, 18 years old, and they're going to make bad decisions. So we don't want to force a kid into a spot where we want it, but we do have to have conversations. And those conversations can be hard. And people don't know the answer, and not knowing the answer is okay also, because you can start out with things like, what don't you want? What do you, I don't want to be in a big city. I don't want to go to Temple because it's in the middle of Philadelphia and it's noisy and it's scary and okay. All right. That eliminates, a good portion of schools.
Yeah.
And now we can and if you can just go kind of backwards and eliminate schools or things you really don't want, we can really narrow down. If you happen to know what you want to study in school, which, let's be honest, we all know, or maybe even yourself, have changed majors. So a lot of people who think they're going to study one thing in college end up studying something completely different in the end. So, knowing what you want to study is a great way of narrowing things down and finding the school that's best for that. But there's a lot of things that go into picking a school, and you can't figure that out unless you're actually having a conversation with your children. And yeah, it's hard to have conversations with 16, 17, 18-year-old. I know very well.
3 times 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, for a lot of, 16-year-olds who are just looking at the color of the jersey, it's going to be such a hard conversation because they don't have, they may not even know what the right questions to ask are. That's probably a bit of a barrier for all parents in the situation too, is knowing even what are the right questions to ask. How can we narrow down, where to sort of point the ship to say.
Yeah. Especially when you start talking about, there are only, if you're on the boys side, like 68 or whatever schools in D1, it's actually pretty easy. But when you start talking about D3, there's, hundreds of schools. Mm-hmm. So that's why I said, I always started off all the conversations like, where do you want to live? Like, what do you want? I have friends, this is the conversation they had. What do you want out of college? I want warm weather. Okay. Boom. You know what cold weather is. And you understand not wanting to be that anymore. So they just, all of a sudden it was like, okay, we're going to draw a line across the states and we're going to look at schools below. You just cut off, if you want to go below that line, you cut off probably 75% of all the schools.
Especially for lacrosse.
In the Northeast. So again, it can be you can start the conversation off really easily with just big questions. What kind of weather do you want? You want to be in a city or an urban setting or a rural setting? You can really kind of narrow this down pretty quickly, and then you can pile on the lacrosse on top and say, do you want to be competitive? Does winning a conference championship every year matter to you? Some kids want to win, and that sounds silly because you think they're all competitors and they all want to win. But some kids want to play because they love playing. They love being with their boys. And they like the whole being a lacrosse player. And there's nothing wrong with that. I tell people all the time, that's okay. And there's guys who are like, I want to win every game. If I don't win, I break everything in my room and I kick the dog. And that's kind of okay also. But you have to understand that schools are different, especially when you start looking at the D3 and D2 levels. Some schools they have lacrosse because it's fun to have lacrosse. And they're going to come 5th in their division every year, in their conference every year. So again, that's another way of kind of narrowing things down. And it's just that's all it is. It's just kind of narrow, kind of chip away till we find what we want.
And this is where, too, the process needs to be so personalized because every kid is going to be different. And even as a parent, you think, like, my kid must want to go play over here until you start having the conversation with them. And then you find out, like, they just want warm weather and they're going to go down to Jackson or something like that. But especially when the cost of school is so expensive that if you are just kind of like shoving your, a square peg in a round hole because you think that's the place to be, and you're not super competitive and you don't like the cold weather in Denver and you, just want the lacrosse as an add-on to your university experience, those are all important things to figure out before you sign on the dotted line and start moving across the country because your experience is tied to a cost as well.
The cost is the scariest part. I did a whole series on inexpensive places to play Division 3 lacrosse.
I love that.
And it was one of my most popular series because people were like, oh, I didn't realize those really good teams were inexpensive.
Yeah.
They're all top 100 teams. I came up with, I think it was 20 for men's and women's. And we just kind of broke it down and just said, if you could go and play lacrosse and do it and get a good education, because that's still the key thing. And you don't, I think the cost at Tufts is $92,000 a year right now. And there's nothing wrong with Tufts. It's a fantastic university and they have a great lacrosse program. But there's no scholarships. They do have a lot of financial aid and grants and that kind of stuff to help make it doable. But there's a big difference between, say, SUNY Geneseo, State University of New York Geneseo, which was $20,000 a year, and a Tufts or a Middlebury where it's $90,000 a year. And obviously lacrosse is different. The atmosphere is different. There's a lot of differences, but they both get a college degree at the end. And that has to be taken into effect because not everybody has that kind of cash to outlay.
Yeah, exactly. How much weight should academics carry versus the lacrosse opportunity?
It should, in my opinion, and again, this varies. There's some people who really want to play lacrosse at the highest level and they want to win a national championship. That's so important to them, and they're willing to kind of take that. Now, lacrosse is really good because lacrosse, the top schools in lacrosse are all good universities. It's kind of different than a lot of other sports, but it's okay to really, really want to play at a high level. That's okay. But for the normal kid, for everybody else, I would say academics has to be higher than the lacrosse because you don't know what's going to happen. God forbid we have injuries and that kind of stuff where you can't play anymore. The old thing is, what would you stay here if you weren't playing lacrosse? And that's really got to be important. And if the academics aren't there, it becomes hollow after a while. If you're just doing this stuff and it's not going to get you anything at the end, why are you doing it? And I think that's why I say academics are so important. And because there's so many good schools that play lacrosse that don't cost a lot of money that actually give you a good education, and you don't have to pay $95,000 a year. You can if you want. I don't.
That's a great question, though. Like, would you stay here if you weren't here to also play lacrosse?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question. And if you're really honest with yourself, a lot of kids, you find it with the D1 kids, where especially if you're going to a school that's very expensive. And let's say they give you some money, to go. Maybe they cut it in half for a scholarship, a nice scholarship. And now you're going to a very prestigious university for $40,000, which is still a lot of money, but from a value perspective, you're getting a tremendous amount of value. And the coach is horrible, and your friends suck there, and everything else, or maybe your friends are great, but the lacrosse team is just driving you insane, and you don't want to do it anymore, and your body aches, and you just wish it could end. But if you quit the team, you can't afford to go there anymore.
Yeah,
right. That's another thing that people don't realize, that they kind of own you, especially with the scholarships. If they give you money, they control your whole being. They really do control whether or not when you eat, when you sleep, when you travel, when you get off a plane, when you get on a plane, when you get to go get a Chipotle meal. That they are under total control of that. So yeah, it's a lot of things that go into that.
Yeah, you definitely become their commodity in a way. What are red flags that a school might look good on paper but be a poor fit long term?
That's a good question. There's a lot of things. I think. I always say that the way a coach or a school is pursuing you in the recruiting process is the best they're ever going to be to you. The absolute best. So they are going to be on their best behavior. They're going to be attentive. They're going to be overly nice. And if they're not doing that, or they flitter in or out and they don't seem like they're giving you their all, and you have to remember, this is going to be the best they're ever going to be. That's a red flag to me. That's a really big flag because you really want them to be on their best behavior. And normally they're super, super nice. They might turn into complete jerks later, but at least they're going to lie to you up front. That's how I describe it to people.
Yeah.
And you at least want that. And I see a lot of people who don't get that, and the recruiting process is full of ghosting and popping back in, and oh, by the way, or whatever it may be, where it's not that process. You have to go where you are wanted. That's the number one. I tell people all the time, just go where they want you. If there's two schools and you really want to go to one and one really wants you, go to the one that really wants you. Long term, you'll be happier than forcing yourself into a situation where coaches are kind of mixed on you. They'll take you because, they can always use another midi, or you're going to be one of our best players. We want you so badly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing. The red flag is, how are they treating you in the recruiting process? They're going to be the best they've ever been.
Any half truths and half information, or if you're chasing them around to get feedback on things. And
yeah, we had my daughter had one program that she's when she's going through the process, and they said, she goes, I want to study this. One school was like, hey, let's get you on with the academic advisors. We'll set up a meeting. You can talk to them. They can answer any question you possibly have about this program. So we want to make sure you're happy in it because there's some other options we think might be better for you. But she'll go over that in the conversation. And another school was like, here's our website.
Yeah. Red flag.
Red flag.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between how they're treating you. And that's, again, they're on their best behavior. And that's how they treated you.
Yeah, but even if you got 50% of example A there, you're still going to get a good experience of someone who's being supportive outside of how you're doing on the field.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. How do current players factor into evaluating fit?
What do you mean by that?
So if you're, maybe you're watching a team play, the current players who are on the team, and when you're evaluating whether it's a good fit for your child to go or for you to go, how much does it play into that evaluation?
I tell you, I'll tell you the experience from my own life. My son is going to play in the Big East next year, and we went to a scrimmage this weekend. And yeah, I was watching all the players, kind of seeing how big they are, how fast they are, because you want to see if your kid can compete there. But I tell you what's better. Watch the coaches. This is a scrimmage. It's the week before season starts. They're focused. They want to watch how they interact. How do they interact with each other? How do they interact with the other coach? How do they interact with the refs? And how do they interact with the players? The coach that my son's going to play for, he was joking around with his players. Guys would score a goal, he'd come over and high five them. And he's praise, and he's joking. And some guy made a huge mistake out in the field, and it came off, and he kind of gave him the, kind of jokingly, kind of mocking the situation. And yeah, so I think you should watch the coaches more than the players and how they interact with everyone around them, because that's how they're going to interact with your child in the process. But to your question, though, watching the players out there is really important, because you can learn about how they run their system, how they utilize players. Do they tend to have the biggest guy on the field dodge from the top and kind of, run everything through one guy? Do they move the ball? Do they have there's so many nuances to it, and how your kid plays and how that's going to work, and you can see if they fit. So I think that's a great way of kind of, when you're narrowing things down, watch the coaches, look at the other players, see where they're from. See where they're from. That's a big one. Oh, they only seem to recruit kids from Long Island, and I love kids from Long Island, but kids from Long Island are special. Or, they have all their kids are from the DMV area, and you're not. You're from the West Coast.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference. What kind of are they all prep school kids? Are they not prep school? And there's a lot of things like this. How they build their roster is important.
Yeah, because individually you kind of want to go in with some more ground than just the sport itself. Have some more commonalities. Maybe you played in a similar division for high school or something like that. But yeah, I could get that too. Like if you're the odd man out all the time, it's going to be a little tougher to get in the mix with those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So my daughter went to school, and there's she's at a very nice school, good people, a lot of prep school kids. They're all wonderful, but they have different experiences than my public school girl, right? And that, to your point, it's that is something you have to have common ground with the people you're going to be involved with. So again, is it a showstopper? No, but it's something you probably want to take a look at and understand, where are they recruiting from? Who are they recruiting? What kind of schools do they get their kids from? That's important.
I would say too, off of the field, if you had the opportunity to talk to current players, like as a parent, it would be interesting to see sort of how the guys carry themselves, like how they speak, how they interact with other parents, because I think you can probably tell quite a bit about how the program is being run based on the development of men and the women of women, how they, confidence, and are they articulate? Are they polite? Are they supportive? Right. You can look for some of those things just if you get the opportunity to have conversations with some current players too.
You should almost insist on talking to players. In fact, most good coaches at good programs are going to put you in touch with players. To have conversations, because it's so important. They're gonna, when you go on for an official visit, they're gonna have you go maybe spend a night in the dorms with the guys or hang out for an afternoon, and they're really testing you to see if you're gonna fit in that group, because they're, you don't want to be the odd man there, and the feedback they get from the players about you as a player does factor into it. And I've seen many cases where the players have come back to the coach and said, this one's an odd duck. I don't know. And that factors. But I think that the good coaches are going to put the player with the other players and the parents with them. We had one at Colgate. I really liked the coaching staff at Colgate. And they put us in a room with some of the players. There was a couple freshmen, a couple sophomores, a senior, maybe a junior also, like 6 guys. And they were like, ask us anything. And we did. We peppered those kids with questions. And they were, to your point, articulate. They could express what was going on. They all loved being at the school. Now, they were all handpicked. I'm sure the disgruntled one wasn't there. But, but they all were. You want them, you say, boy, I would love my kid to be like one of these kids. So good coaches and good recruiting process are going to insist that you are talking to players. And as a parent, I would want to talk to them. And the schools that allowed us to do that, it made the big difference.
Yeah, and especially too for a young 17-year-old or 18-year-old who's about to go off to school to be able to talk to the captains of the team, these guys who they're going to look up to and really get the inside scoop on even how the captains like to run the team related things, like what happens in the lifting room and what happens with like team events and what are we involved with in the community, and just going kind of deep with those guys, because they're going to usually anyway, they'll be coached a little bit maybe, but they'll usually give you some honest answers on that stuff.
We met a bunch of coaches with my youngest son where we were having the same conversation, and we were so lucky in my son's recruiting. We went on, I don't know, too many visits. It was a good problem to have, but we went on a ton of visits and we met some fantastic coaches. Really good men who you would have no issue giving your child over to. And when every one of them had us talk to one of the players, we asked them, is that guy that we just talked to the same guy you see on a day-to-day basis? And they were all like, it's exactly the same guy. Yeah. And, and that's the key, because like I said, some guys are really good at turning the charm on. And they're a little different when the season starts. But, that's what you're trying to find out is the guy who's recruiting me going to be the guy who's going to coach me later on?
Yeah.
And talking to the players is it.
Yeah. One thing that's maybe like a little bit of an insight into that is with social media now, like you do get to see some behind the scenes of, obviously they're still going to handpick the best clips of them coaching and stuff like that, but their best pregame speech, but you do get to see a little bit of an insight in terms of how they communicate or how they maybe run a practice. And as much as, you're as a recruitee are sending videos to them, it's probably also a good idea to be trying to find as much, video content on what those coaches and what those players are doing around the sport and within practice, and because you can see the games usually depending on the level.
Yeah, the only thing I do warn parents, because I've had some parents reach out to me. There are a couple services out there that have like rate your coach. There's a lot of those things out there. There's a couple different ones, and where college athletes, supposedly college athletes, I think there's a lot of college parents who actually fill these forms out, and they can tell you what they like and dislike about a player. And my philosophy on that always is the people who will fill out one of those forms are not the happy people.
Yeah. It's like who writes Yelp reviews.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, yes, you should definitely look at social media, but, kind of look through it through a lens of, it's probably not this good and it's probably not that bad.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle. How much does coaching philosophy and staff alignment matter in recruiting, and what signs suggest a player and staff may not be a good match? Oh, this is such an important one. There were a number of teams. We were pretty lucky in the people who recruited my youngest son. I kind of forgot half the stuff about my oldest son's recruiting process, but my youngest one's still fresh in the memory. Yeah.
He's a very particular player, a very type of player. He's going to fit in systems that are going to work really well for him. There's systems which are not going to work for him. And he got recruited by coaches that mostly ran the systems that would work for him. But there were a couple that weren't. And, when we were talking to them and we were having conversations, we were asking questions like, how do you see him fitting in your system? Or what do you think's his best trait that's going to fit here? And you get some answers and you're like, that's not my kid.
Huh.
I think you got it mixed up with somebody else.
Yeah, he was wearing 13 in the showcase.
Not 31.
Not 31.
So, as a general rule, fit as far as system is so important, and knowing what kind of system they run. like my son's going to fit very well in a very fast moving, quick passing. He's not going to work really well in a system where it's like get the biggest guy the ball, clear out, and dodge. That's not his game. And when you start talking to coaches and you start talking about having to talk about their systems, it becomes pretty apparent what's going to work for you and what's not going to work. And again, even if the uniforms are really pretty and they have the right colors for your eyes, if you're in the wrong system, you're going to be watching with a stick in your hand from the sidelines more than you're going to be on the field.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even my experience, played with guys who were great, coming out of the programs that they were in, and then the system that we ran, they kind of molded a little bit to it, but it was always, it's kind of trying to force a style of play that probably didn't work best for them.
Yeah, I have another quick story on that. I have a very highly ranked player in the 2019 class. He was top 25. He went and he committed to a Big Ten school. He was absolutely locked in. He was excited as could be. Great coach, and he went and got coached by him at an event. First time, they were getting recruited when they were very young at that point. So he committed when he was in 9th grade, I think. And he went and got coached at this event. And he got done, and he walked to his dad and said, I can't play for this guy.
Wow.
I can't play. And his dad's like, what? He's like, he wants me to run a play exactly the way he wrote it up.
Yeah,
I need to take 5 steps to the right. I need to throw it to the outlet. Then I got to make 3 steps to the left, and then I'm going to... He goes, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And then, he's like, I'll never play here because I cannot do that kind of rote running of plays. And he was smart enough to realize it, and he committed to another school. But that's a perfect example of, like, he realized, at least early in the fact, that system was not going to be good for him. And the way the coach expected it was not going to work.
I'm kind of lucky to get an opportunity to run with him because, you don't really want to figure that out on first day on campus. Like, oops, I made a mistake here.
That would be a big oops, right? Yeah.
How often do families underestimate coaching turnover?
I tell people all the time. Parents tell me all the time, their assistant coach, their defensive coordinator is the best coach in the world. I go, don't fall in love with him. Don't fall in love with him. Unless he's 45 or 50 years old and looks very comfortable in the chair that he's sitting in. If he's a young guy and he's dynamic and he's excited to have his job, just don't fall in love with him because he won't be there.
Right.
There was one particular coach that we love, assistant coach. His dad's a famous coach also. And I loved his system. It was my younger son. Loved his system, loved him. I'm like, this guy, you could play for this guy. This guy's good. And, and we ended up not choosing that school. We chose another school. And literally the day we committed to the new school, that guy left. He left and went to another school. So it's like, I almost broke my own rule. Don't fall in love with assistant coaches because they are transient at best.
Yeah, especially like the coordinators and stuff too. You got to remember it's their career as well if they're really trying to make it as a coach, and they kind of live out of a suitcase, right? Like looking for the next level up of a job, I tell
him, I said, unless the guy has lots of gray hair and his seat and his chair is like really worn in, then he ain't going anywhere. He's got a couple kids and he's working for a living. But yeah, if you really like an assistant coach, chances are someone else is going to like them and they're going to offer him a job.
Yeah, right, exactly, and work his way up the ladder a little bit. What questions should players be asking coaches that they usually don't?
I don't think people ask hard questions. They don't ask questions that they're afraid to ask questions that would make them look bad, but they want the answer. So first off, there is no right question. There is, even though the people on the IG and TikTok will tell you here's the question you ask to guarantee yourself a scholarship. There are no questions like that. There really aren't. But you should ask questions that you want the answers to. If you ask questions that you want the answers to, then you're going to get answers and be able to make better decisions. So I always tell people, I said, ask them if everyone travels.
Yeah.
That's my big one. It's like, because there's nothing worse than finding out you're on campus, you're wearing the uniform, you're practicing all those hours and all the lifts and all the conditioning, and then it's like big game day and you're watching on ESPN like the rest of us. And that's rough. And understand you're a freshman, you're probably not going to play anyway, especially at a good program. But, kind of go in the airport and travel or on the bus with all the guys, that's kind of the thing. And now with the roster limits and though people talk about the NCAA settlement as if it's a boon, it's not a boon for lacrosse in most places. They are tightening the budgets because, you saw Rutgers lose $75 million this year. They're squeezing, and they're going to squeeze from other programs. So, if you can take 32 or 35 on a road trip and leave 10 at home, that's a significant savings. So I tell people, but as a general rule, ask questions that you want the answers to. How am I, especially questions that are about me. How am I going to fit in your system? Where do you see me contributing? What do you think my role is going to be as a freshman? When I'm a senior, what do you perceive me having? I mean, some of them are hard questions to answer because no one really knows what the heck you're going to do when you get on campus. But if the coach should be able to give you answers. But as a general rule, ask questions you want the answers to, and you'll never have a problem.
I think it goes back to as well, like talking to the schools that want you there as well, and they're going to be more receptive to answering your questions. Like it'd be pretty hard. It'd be a pretty poor question to really rub a coach the wrong way, where they're like, "Never mind, put next to that guy's name." I think they're going to be, as long as they're receptive to wanting you to come there, they're going to be receptive to answering your questions.
I think that's a good listen. If they react in a negative way, it's a pretty good sign, also, or maybe a bad sign. But at least you'll know the answer. Yeah.
How can players tell if they're being recruited as depth versus development?
Oh, it probably has a lot to do with timing. When they're recruiting you. Also, the nice thing about it right now is that you can look at a school and see who they've committed. My son had one experience where he's left-handed lefty attackman, and a school was reaching out to us, a top 10 school reached out to him and said, "Oh, we want you." And they were going through the whole process, the whole feeling out process, and we set up a visit. And the day before the visit, they committed another left-handed attackman, and he was like, "Okay, that's cool." I mean, there's a lot of other schools, so it's not a big deal. So they still wanted him to come, but they already had picked somebody else up. So he was going to be depth for them.
Yeah.
And so and that's the nice thing about today versus say 10 or 15 years ago, you pretty much know who they have committed. Inside Lacrosse does a great job of tracking almost every commit. It's at the nth level. So you can understand who they've committed, what positions they have filled, and you can kind of figure it out. You can ask coaches. They're going to lie to you. They're going to always try to make themselves look good. You're never going to be the guy who's a really good practice player, right? You're always going to be a potential starter. But I mean, I think you have to do a lot of homework.
Yeah. Yeah. With other sports, sometimes it's maybe more obvious because, you take football as an example, and the school you want to go, they've got a second-year quarterback who's really good, and he's all state and whatever, and you're a quarterback. You're going to wait a couple of years for that guy to graduate before you see the field. In lacrosse, maybe it's not quite as obvious because there's multiple players for each position potentially, or if there is good depth on the team. I think it's a good point. Like doing the research of who's on the roster, where are they in their college journey, and how would you fit into that program? And then obviously it comes down to questions to the coaches of where you fit.
100%. If you understand, I kind of answered the question from a recruiting perspective as far as a single class, but you're right. If you look, you're a lefty, and they have two lefties at each class ahead of you. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of competition for that spot. So, and the guy was an All-American for the last 2 years. Okay, well, you're going to wait for him, especially positions where you can't get on the field otherwise. If you're a face-off guy, you're a goalie, you're an LSM, where there really is only one, then you really have to be extremely aware of who else is on the roster, especially goalies. Goalies are the hardest one because, you can only have one goalie, and they don't change goalies very, very often, and sometimes you're going to sit in the bench for 2 or 3 years at least.
Yeah, basically, as long as they're saving the ball and they're healthy, they're going to be in the net.
Yep.
In a whatever 14-game season, the backup goalie might get 2 to 3 games out of that. Depending on health and performance. And it probably comes down a little bit to the player themselves, and how competitive they are to develop.
Yeah. So that goes back to your earlier question where we talked about, what do you want out of play? Some kids have to play, right? I just want to be on the field. The worst thing you can do to some of these kids is tell them to sit on the sidelines. Most of these kids have never not been picked first on their, anything. Yeah. And now you're like, oh yeah, you can go to UNC and you'll probably get on the field as a senior. Yeah. Maybe a junior if you're lucky. And then they're like, I get it. It's cool. I might win a national championship. That's awesome. But I don't want to watch other people play for 2 years. No, and other kids are like, heck no, I want to be on the best team competing in practice. My role is to make every one of those teams better. Every practice is my Super Bowl. That's a different type of mentality. And some kids just don't have that. They're like, I'd rather go to the 30th ranked team in the country and play there. Yeah. Knowing that I'll never win a national championship. I might never make the NCAAs in 4 years, but I'll play. Yeah.
Yeah. Comes down to your choices. What role does honesty from coaches actually play in the process? Because we know we're getting the best of them on the spot, but how much of it plays into it?
I think that's where you have to do your homework because, talk to the players who are there, talk to the players who maybe if you have a good network and you could find players who didn't choose them, you can talk to them. That's also a big thing. But, I demand honesty. Tell me, all my kids play the same way, which is like, just tell us what we're doing wrong. We'll fix it. And if someone's going to lie to you in the recruiting process or not be truthful or bend the situation a little bit, that's a real bad sign. You really just want someone to say, hey, I want you. Hey, look, I think you can be a contributor on this team. They'll use code words if they, you're not going to be a starter at day one. Yeah. But I think that honesty from a coach is almost paramount. It's something I demand from all the people we deal with. It's just like, be honest with the players. They can handle it. They're not eggs. They don't crack. You can be honest with them. Tell them things that they're not going to like, and everything will be okay. But if you have a coach who's going to be pussyfooting around things and not being honest, it's a bad environment, and it ends up being a lot of tension, anxiety, and everything else associated with it. And look, this is stressful enough as it is as a college athlete. You don't need the coach adding to it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of debate around showcases and camps, and when do these help, and when do they actually hurt a player's recruiting story?
Oh, what a good question. Let's give you an A for this question.
Thank you.
Okay. I think so much money is wasted on showcases. And where I say this, it goes back to my original point about you have to know where you fit in the whole cycle of everything. Where are you? Because I see kids who are solid Division III kids, great Division III kids, who are going to have great careers, maybe All-Americans. And they're going to events that have no Division III coaches there. They're at events where even if they play at their absolute best, they're not going to get recruited because they're missing that thing that the Division I coaches want. So that's the problem I have with the showcases. Is I think that you need to be at the place where people who can recruit you are going to be. That has to mean some self-awareness as to what I can do, where I can play. And I think that's the mismatch that most parents fail to kind of recognize. If you can identify your skill level and where you should play and go to those events, it's great. You can't say, oh, Johnny is going to go to Main Stage or Showtime or 1% and play really well and get recruited. It doesn't work that way. You have to be at that level to be able to showcase there. You have to be to be seen and play well. And I think that's the biggest problem I have with showcases. People get frustrated with them are at the wrong ones. Not that the showcases themselves are bad. It's just a way to get noticed. But if you're being noticed by people who you can't play for, it doesn't have any value. So I think that's what you see people say, oh, it's a cash grab. It's a waste of time. Da-da. Yes. If you're at the wrong one, it is all of those things. And again, it comes down to going to the best whether it be a tournament, like if you're going to go Naptown and you're going to play and you're going to go there with your single A, lacrosse team that's half, it's okay. They're pretty good in Kentucky. They're pretty good, but you're going to go there and you're going to get creamed. There's no value. And the same thing applies for showcases and everything else. You have to go to the right ones. And the nice thing is there are showcases that are focused on Division III or high academic or Division II focused, or, where you can really kind of, go play in front of people who might actually recruit you. I'm not saying people should not, knock down their dreams and not strive to be, but there's also a little bit of reality that has to seep in eventually. Otherwise, you're just throwing money away.
Yeah,
just throwing it away, and that's why I think a lot of the frustration comes from that. You're at the wrong event. There's nothing wrong with showcases, right? In general.
Yeah, 100%.
There's nothing wrong with being at the wrong one.
Yeah, that's the time waste. It's like
ordering seafood at a steakhouse.
Not going to get what you're looking for. If there was like an order of operation for players to figure out where they stand, what do you think that would be? Like, if do they go to a showcase and realize like, whoops, I'm not at this level, or do they go to a combine, or what would it kind of be if there was an order of operation to kind of narrow down where you stand in the spectrum of all these players in your age group? Because the best guys get blue chipped and they get those stars, and people kind of know where they stand, but how does everyone else figure it out?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something we've been kind of talking about on the Instagram and TikTok channel is the fact that how do you figure out where you are? Like, how do you judge? And I've said that you should start off with simply talking to your coach.
Yeah,
that's where you got to start. And I found, and this is very foreign to me because my local high school, we've had like 2 coaches in the last 50 years. So there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of, everyone knows our coaches. They're reliable. They know what they're doing. And I know that may be an anomaly because the sport is growing faster than our ability to coach it. So a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking to their coaches, or they feel that their coaches don't really understand what it means to play at the next level. But I do think that going to somebody who is not being paid by you is a big thing. Just go and so your club coach should be able to tell you how you're doing, like what level you're at. But they also have a financial, problem with that, because if they tell you you're not progressing, you're not really doing well, then you might change clubs and take your money somewhere else. So they're probably going to say things like, hey, you're doing really well. You're almost there. Hey, we're going to have a couple sessions on Saturday. They're $235 an hour. And I think that will push you right over the edge and you'll be a great player. So I think you need to find someone who you're not paying. But I also tell people that, if you can go, like, prospect days are really rough, right? Prospect days, I'm not really a huge fan of them because there's a lot of things go into prospect days that aren't as fair as you'd hope them to be. But I do think using prospect days as a way of kind of seeing where you fall is a great way. And I say always go, like, I'm lucky. There's a number of schools in our general area here where you can go for $50, $100, $150 for a day, get coached by a Division III coach or a Division II coach, or if you want to go an hour away, you can go to 3 Division I schools, and you can go and test yourself. You may not want to go to that school, but the kids who are going there are at a certain level. Are you able to play and be seen and get noticed and get, look really good against a Division III, Division II, Division I? It's a great way of kind of knowing where you stand.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And then, too, if you get the chance to talk to that coach and really say to him, what are the holes in my game? Where do you see me matching up against other players that you've seen? Am I a bottom 10 or am I a top 10 guy? And really just having a better understanding of where you stand. Maybe tough with a 16-year-old to be self-aware enough to be like, to get poked, and see where you do have holes in your game that you can work on. But a self-aware 16-year-old might say, okay, right, time to buckle down and fix those things and get better.
Before Dennis walks us through how to communicate with college coaches the right way, here's a brief word from our podcast sponsors, Cala Red Light and Bioptimizers. When my training volume and schedule increased, recovery became the bottleneck. I started using Cala Red Light at night, 10 to 15 minutes before bed, and my sleep and overall recovery noticeably improved. It's now part of my routine year-round. And with Bioptimizers, I added Masszymes because training hard doesn't matter if you're not absorbing what you eat. It improved digestion and how I feel after meals. Simple, effective support. I only partner with companies I personally use and trust. The links and codes are in the show notes. All right, back to Dennis. Let's talk about how players should actually communicate with coaches and how to read real interest from noise.
Right, and you know, you can also leverage your high school coach. I mean, I'm a huge fan of high school coaches. I think they're getting a bad rap, and people, I guess I always joke that it's like the third rail for me. If I mention anything about high school coaches, everyone like loses their minds. But high school coaches are respected by college coaches because they know they're putting in a lot of long hours. So if your high school coach reaches out, if you go to a prospect day, this is my usual tell people to do. You're going to a prospect day, you go to your high school coach, say, hey, coach, I'm going to go to so-and-so's camp on Saturday. Can you reach out to him and tell him I'm coming? And almost every coach will say, sure, no problem. I'll reach out and they'll email or text, you know, and say, hey, I got a player coming. He's a really good left-handed attackman. I think you'd really like him. You keep an eye on him. I might follow up on next week and find out. And then they follow up next week and they can get really good feedback because coaches don't mind talking to other coaches. They sometimes get squirrely when they're talking to a player, especially, you know, there's some rules about talking to players,
Yes.
and they don't want to talk to parents. Parents can't talk to them either.
Yeah.
But a high school coach can have a really good conversation and get some really, really good feedback from a college coach on a player. And, you know, they'll say things like, hey, he's not athletic enough. He's not explosive enough. I don't think he's going to be able to play here, but, you know, he probably could play at this level. And that's how you have to build it. And, again, so you're going to get a lot of comments or you might get feedback you don't like. And people are scared of that. And it's better to do that than chase, throw your money down the drain, go into events that you have no business being at.
Yeah, that's great advice because a high school coach can kind of act like an intermediary. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that coach to coach conversation, they're going to just give each other the straight dope on what's really happening. Like there's no incentive for a college coach to pussyfoot around and give false information for a player who's just going to, get coached by somebody else, right? They're just going to give them the straight information.
Yeah, it's gonna be short and sweet and that kind of stuff. And club directors can certainly do that if you really don't like if you're like I said, some people really do not like their high school coaches. This is the weirdest thing for me. It's completely opposite of my life. But your club coach can certainly do that. But everyone has this kind of like, oh boy, it's the club director's calling. He's going to sell me on a player. High school coaches aren't selling it. They don't care. They're just trying to help out their kids. And that's why I'm always a fan of saying, okay, here you go. The high school coach has no financial stake in the kid. He wants the kid to succeed because the kid's a good kid, comes from a good family, is good to the community, and college coaches respect that.
And ultimately, he's going to graduate out of high school, hopefully. So you're not going to have him, sticking around for longer as a player. So you might as well get him off in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Do you see, just circling back to the showcases and stuff, do you see differences in how players behave at showcases versus real games?
They have to.
Yeah.
Right, they have to. This is the thing that annoys people the most is the whole notion of, well, the ball hogs are, but they, and I hate it because I'm like a purist on the lacrosse. Like I love a good extra pass guy, right? Mm-hmm. Move the ball, one more.
Yeah.
But that's not how you get recruited, right? You have to get yours in a reasonable fashion. Mm-hmm. And you have to show coaches that you can create on your own. And if you're, say, a passer, that you can draw a slide to make that pass. You can manipulate the defense. And as a result, you have to have the ball in your stick. So, yes, people do play differently. And it frustrates the bejeebus out of people, right? Mm-hmm. They are absolutely, you'll hear people, oh, my God, it was horrible. It was hero ball. Hero ball is the usual answer, right? It's hero ball. And yes, it is. Now, people sometimes take it to the nth degree, and it does hurt a player. You don't want to be the ball hog, but there's a certain amount. You better show coaches that when you get the ball, you can make something happen, either making the defense move, making the pass, or creating your own shot, getting your hands free. Yeah, people are going to play differently, and that's the nature of showcase. You're not there to win games. You're there to be noticed.
Yeah, I remember going to like some of my first ones for showcases, and we weren't really like pre-coached on that, so we kind of went just there's a bunch of us who went, so we kind of went to play a bit of like a team game. We wanted to go win games, and then we were watching these other teams. We're like, well, that face-off guy just keeps winning the ball, and they're just blasting straight at the net. Never pass, never look to another guy.
Never going to give that ball up.
Never going to give the ball up. And then we watch this other guy over here. Wow, that guy 80% of the game had the ball in his stick and just never gave it up. But I mean, they made stuff happen. But what do you think that there are probably, I mean, it would be hard to narrow this down, but there are probably coaches and recruiters who are looking more in depth than just the guy who's got the ball in his stick all the time. Like they're looking for those intangible skills. They're looking for, space creating and, drawing slides and stuff like that.
Well, drawing slides, absolutely. So what the way it works, because the people we had a whole series on this. I did a bunch of videos where I literally just talked about this. So yes, coaches love intangibles, and they'll tell you until they're blue in the face how they really want the extra pass, and they want smart players and high lacrosse IQs, and all those things that make a really good lacrosse player. They want all those things, but they want athletes first, right? So there's a you have to be this tall to get on this ride, right? And not necessarily heightened thing, but you have to be a certain athletic ability. You have to be able to have enough speed to get your hands free. You have to be big enough to absorb, not necessarily huge, but you have to be big enough to absorb the punishment. You have to be so there's a baseline that until you reach that baseline, and that's going to vary from coach to coach, division to division. Once you reach that baseline, then all the intangibles come into play, right? Then when you start comparing all the kids who are above that line, that's when you start looking at, what's his lacrosse IQ? How does he move the ball? What kind of teammate is he? Is he making people better? All those things really then differentiate you. But you can't just be a really good teammate and a really good whatever unless you are at the minimum level of athleticism for that particular coach, because they want the kid to be able to make an impact on the field. And if you just are not fast enough to get separation, or you're not big enough to stop someone on defense, it doesn't matter. So I always say it's you have to be this tall to ride this ride.
It's kind of like in Moneyball. What do they say? Like, does he pass the visual test?
Yeah.
And they're looking at guys first to see, does he have the stature? Does he have the size, or does she have the size built? And then how do they move on the field? Like, they're, what's obvious basically to them first. And then there's another layer sort of beyond that of the IQ and the skill and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. The size is easy, right? If you walk on the field and one kid's 6'3", and one kid's 5'10", your eyes, no matter who you are going to gravitate towards the bigger kid. So they are automatically going to get noticed first. Just the nature of how we judge things in our vision. But it's going to be a lot more on that speed, quickness, explosiveness, creating space. And then, you'll hear kids say, my kid's a great passer. He makes lots of assists. You can make 10 assists in a game and do nothing to earn them.
Yeah.
Right? You can pass to an open guy and he scores. You get an assist. That is completely worthless from a recruiting perspective. Now, you make a hard dodge, you force the slide to come to you, and then you kick it to the guy who became open because you manipulated the defense. That's valuable. Right? That's valuable. And parents don't understand that, and they don't know how to value. Stats are horrible. Like there's no differentiation on a good assist or a good goal, or with goalies, most of the shots that go in, you have the could you have made the save? No, right? This is you weren't gonna no one's gonna make that save, but there's some you should have. You have to make all the ones you can, and maybe steal one or two that you shouldn't have gotten. So Yeah, that's the big thing. But I think it's athleticism is really the key, not necessarily size. Because you can have small players, and there's tons of small players who have been extremely good, but you don't have small, slow players.
Yeah, right, exactly. They have to be
exceptional at something.
I think the first time I heard this, and it was in like the Kyle Harrison, Hopkins era, was Dave Petromal saying I think he said, I'd rather take an athlete than a skill player because I can teach him the skill. And, he took someone like Kyle Harrison that was extremely athletic, great in multiple sports, and basically just sort of gave him the opportunities to develop as a good lacrosse player while being an athlete. And I think that was, for me, it stood out a lot to see a coach at that level, at that school say, it's not always all about the best lacrosse player skill-wise. I would rather take an athlete and just develop them to be a good lacrosse player. And Kyle Harrison's obviously one of the top examples of that, a guy who flourished at that school.
Yeah,
and beyond.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that statement. But that's the thing that frustrates parents, because they hear the coaches say lacrosse IQ and all those intangibles, but they have to realize you got to be at this level, whatever that, and that varies a lot between levels and coaching.
Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about this too, is like the age of when you're going to these showcases too. Like if you're an 8th grader, and one guy's hit puberty before the other, one girl's hit puberty before the other, and you've got these two players standing next to each other, and one is over 6 feet and the other one is just not been blessed with early 8th grade puberty yet. They may eventually become the same height. They may have this, similar skill level, but in terms of visual, like being visible to these coaches and stuff, obviously, like we said, the visibility test, the tall guy is going to get the eye on him first.
Yeah, there was one coach when they were doing the recruiting, with recruiting embryos. He joked that he goes, I try to recruit the Irish and the Scottish kids when they're 16 or 17 because they finally have grown. he goes, so there is a lot of that, and that's one of the reasons why the coaches were pushing back the recruiting timeline, because it allows some catching up, and I think we're going to go and talk about reclassing eventually here, but that is a big deal where physical ability, being a little bit older, a little bit stronger, everything else, it makes a big difference. And that's why when you go to these showcases and you're playing as an 8th or 9th grader, coach is like, oh, kid's good. Okay.
Yeah.
They're not going to, let me write that down and put it in my notebook for 3 years from now. Is that how it works? So they don't know what you're going to be. You might stop growing. You might choose to play baseball, or you might become a great football player. How many lacrosse players who are really, really good are playing football right now?
Especially these days. Especially with Bill Belichick looking for lacrosse on the lacrosse field.
Bill's taking everybody.
Let's shift gears just to outreach and communication. So for families navigating emails, letters, and interest in outreach, how should they interpret interest or silence without overreacting?
They all overreact. Everyone I overreact. When you get a note from Bresci, from UNC, I don't care if it's a form letter. No, Bresci sent me a note.
Hey, you get excited.
Can't help it, right? It's great. You have to understand that there are some things there's a lot of emails being sent out from college coaches that are being sent to hundreds of people at a time, mass mailings, and they might be emailing you because they got the distribution list from a tournament that you were at. You may have signed up on their questionnaire. So they'll be sending you emails, and they're really, really good at making mass mailings look like personalized emails. So you have to do some sleuthing when you get these emails to find out, are they telling they want me or my son or my daughter to come to this prospect day because they like her? Or are they just saying, kid named this, come to my event? And it's tough. I have parents who send me emails and they say, can you read this email? Are they talking about my kid? And I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's a good one. I go, it's a mass mailing. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. if the coach puts their cell phone number in it, it's a great thing. If they refer to your the tournament where they saw you and something you did or a team that you played, a specific event, I saw you playing against Mad Lax and I loved the way you handled the pressure they were putting on you in the second half there because they were really going at you and you just went through them. They're going to make it personally because they're trying to woo you. If it's generic, hey, you've been having a great season. You've been working really hard. That's a lot different. So again, and it's wishful thinking because every parent I know who has gotten an email hopes that it's real, right? Yeah. You want Freshie's note to be real, right? You want, pick your Ivy League school to really want you to come. The truth is prospect days and things like that are at their basis a fundraiser for the schools, for the programs. They make a lot of money off all these kids coming. And they do recruit out of them, absolutely. They're going to bring in kids they want to see, and those kids they're really looking at. And if someone does go there and blows their socks off, they're certainly going to notice. But they're focused on their 10 or 12 kids that they invited, and the other 80 kids are there to allow the 10 or 20 kids they want to look at to have games. Right. They're cannon fodder.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gut punch if you show up to a prospect event thinking you got the one email and there's 100 other people there.
100 other people got the same one, right? It's tough, and everyone wants it to be true. But again, you have to be a sleuth, and I wish it wasn't the case. And they've become so good at hiding the fact that it's a generic email that it's tough on parents. It's really tough on parents, tough on kids.
Would you consider that sort of like a secondary net of how they're trying to recruit to schools? Like the primary net is going to be, direct communication, and then these sort of mass emails that go out, or maybe a secondary, even like a tertiary net to get more people involved. And like you said, it's a bit of a fundraiser for the program. And
so there's recruiting, and there's fundraising. So if you're sending lots of emails about your prospect day, that's a fundraising. If you're talking to a player, if they're they send the coaches. I bet you coaches would rather email because they're older, but most coaches are texting, texting and FaceTiming when they want to communicate with you when you're in that cycle. So I don't even consider it recruiting. It's a fundraising event. If they want to recruit you, you'll know. You're not going to be guessing.
Yeah. It'll be more obvious. How should players think about sending emails versus receiving them?
Oh, email sending is so important, but you got to do it the right way. Again, it's targeted, it's personalized. You can't send out the same email to 700 coaches. Now, I do reference the fact that there's the shotgun approach. When you're a younger player, you're like a 9th grader or a 10th grader, and you don't know what you're going to do, and you're not even sure where you should play. It's okay to kind of send out a note that's kind of the same. You're sending to a whole lot of people. But as you go through this process, that the number of people you're reaching out to has to shrink to a reasonable amount at the end. But yeah, when you're younger, when you're a freshman or whatever, and you're sending, to every D1 coach, just, see if anyone has any interest, that's okay. But emails have to be personalized to the coach. I like sending emails to each positional coach, individuals. Hey, Coach Lanning, Coach, Johnson, separate emails. I don't know. The way I don't know how you are with your emails, but when I get an email with 17 people on the CC line, I'm like, that ain't really for me. Click. Not looking at that. And then you have to have something that's going to catch their eye, which is the videos. And, no one's going to get recruited from a video. Like, you're not going to get a commit. No one's going to commit you from a video. But what videos do is allow you to post to take a quick look at you. And they're just looking, is there anything there that catches my eye? Is there something there that's worth kind of looking at again? And you're going to get, and this annoys everybody. You're going to get about 20 to 30 seconds on a video. That's how much they're going to watch. So you got to make sure that first couple clips are bangers. Maybe if you have really 3 or 4 good ones, they'll watch a little bit more, but they're stopping after 40 seconds. Like, that's the most you're going to get. But that's just going to be like, maybe we should keep this one on the list and, move it over here. But you have to be personalized. You have to include film. You have to include your pertinent information. You're not writing an essay. This is not a college essay. This is giving them information about you in the cleanest sense that they possibly can. And there's other, like IMLCA or IWLCA profiles that have to be included because that's another way they can go to one place to see everything about you. And make it easy. If the goal is to give the coaches the easiest way to get all the information about you. So no one's going to read a 4-page, how much you want to go to UNC, right?
Yeah.
Here's how big I am. Here's how much I weigh. Here's my position. Here's my high school. Here's my club team. Here's where I'm going to be. Here's my film. I really want to be a Tar Heel because whatever the reason is. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
That's it. Make it easy.
That's a good clarification too, because I think a lot of kids they probably do want to go like above and beyond reaching out to their top pick school, and so they're going to do more because they think more is better. But really, it's like you got to remember these coaches are busy. They've got 1,000 emails coming in constantly from people who want to go there and everything else that's already going on there at the school. So the cleanest way, like bullet point almost format to just get your top tier information to them so that they can just digest it quickly, send it off to the O coach or the D coach or the goalie coach, check this guy out, reach out, whatever.
Yeah, and again, I do think that we spend a lot, too much time on video and film, like making video. I've done enough videos on making videos for anyone. And the truth is, you don't get committed because of your video. You get noticed, like you get to go to the next phase. It gets you past the hurdle, and
so it knock on the door.
It has to be good enough to get you to the next stage.
Yeah,
which in most cases is a visual. They're going to watch you. Either they're going to ask you to come to their prospect day, they're going to go to your next event, and they're going to put eyes on you and see, were those 4 or 5, 6 clips that I saw the same kid who was on the field? Yes or no?
Yeah. They'll put the effort in if it looks worth it.
You gotta hook them. You gotta hook them.
When is follow up appropriate, and when does it hurt?
Tough one, really tough one. So I tell people that I say you should always have a purpose for sending an email. Hey, coach, just want to, first email is like, hey, it's who I am, blah, 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 here's my video, whatever. The follow-up has to have some value. Coach, I just wanted to follow up with you. I sent my email 3 weeks ago. Just want to give you an idea what's going on in our season. We played 5 games. We've won 4 of them. I'm leading scorer on the team. We beat our biggest rival. Da, da, da. Here's some more video of those first 5 games that I thought maybe you'd want to see. And now it's not. It's a kind of like ding, ding, ding. I'm still here, which is what you're really doing. But you're adding value. You're telling. Even it's like, hey, I've been in the weight room all winter. I went from 180 to 195 in 3 months. Right? Okay, that's information. You're adding to the story that you're painting about yourself. I think too often it's like, hey, coach, I sent you my video last month. You didn't respond to me. Here's the same video over again. Can you please look at it this time? No. That doesn't do
Probably
anything.
not going to help. That maybe is a scenario where it doesn't help your case.
Yeah, and again, I think that there's no real. The only problem you can get, the only thing you can do to make it a bad thing, follow-ups, is if you're just annoying.
Yeah.
Like if you send a follow-up and people do. Because you're rolling your eyes like no one would do that. Yeah, they do. I get people DM, hey, I sent a note to the coach on Monday and he hasn't responded. Is it okay to send something? I'm like, dude, it's Tuesday. Pump the brakes.
Yeah.
If you don't hear something by next week, think about putting together an email and then send it at the end of the week, right?
Yeah.
You gotta slow down. But that's the only time you get in real trouble. Coaches are not going to have a real big problem with the same email coming unless you start bothering them. Unless it gets to the point where like, oh my God, here's that goddamn email again. Click.
Yeah, block.
Yeah, block. Exactly.
How much patience do you feel is required in this phase of recruiting?
A ton.
Yeah.
Is that a metric? I don't know. It's a lot, a ton. It's so important to be patient because look, we all get pulled in on the September 1st. My son played with the number one defenseman in the 26th class, AJ Theodorakakis. Great kid. Lives down the road from me. He committed at 12:01 on September 1st to Army.
Yeah.
He was like, I'm
First
in.
moment.
He wanted to go to Army so badly. It was his dream school. And I think that a lot of people think that this process happens like that. Everyone is like AJ, where it literally happens in like, oh my God, they call, you're done. In the best cases, even my son's recruiting process probably lasted 2 months. Because it takes a long time, even on the best case where you're trying to visit schools and you're trying to learn. It's very difficult to be quick. Mm-hmm. That's in the best case, right? That's in the best case. For the average player, it's a very long process. Yeah. And it feels like, and parents have told me, especially the 27 class, because they've lost their minds, where they were sending notes out on, let's say, like September 30th. All the spots in D1 are gone. I'm like, no, they're not. He goes, yeah, UNC has filled their class. I go, UNC is one school of a lot of schools. Just relax. There's places to play. So I think that there's you have to have a lot of patience, and you have to block out all the noise, because if you don't, you'll be sucked into this, oh my God, there's no more spots, and Inside Lacrosse is pushing out a list that says, every school is filled, and it can get insane. So patience is so important, and understanding that everything happens in the right time.
Do you think like a safe window of time to get through the recruiting process? I mean, obviously there's lots of scenarios where it goes much longer, but like 4 months, you kind of have a pretty good idea where you're going to go, like from September 1st. No hard, fast rules on this.
Just before Dennis breaks down the importance of patience in recruiting timelines, here's a brief word from our podcast sponsors, Whoop and ATP Labs. Whoop has been a big part of how I approach training and recovery. It gives me objective data on sleep, strain, and readiness, so I'm not guessing. I'm adjusting based on real information. For athletes navigating recruiting, learning to measure and manage recovery is a competitive advantage. And ATP Labs is a supplement company I trust personally and use with clients. High quality ingredients, properly dosed, no fluff, just effective support for performance, recovery, and overall health. You'll find links and details in the show notes. All right, let's get back to Dennis and why patience might be the most underrated skill in the entire recruiting process.
There's no hard, fast rules, because there are players. Colgate took their last 26 this September. So that's a full year.
Yeah.
They took the last kid. So, you look at that and think, oh, and I know that on the girls' side, there's a lot more girls' programs. And therefore it takes longer to fill those classes. There's 137 programs versus 68. So there's just almost 2x the number. So those classes fill a lot slower. And certain schools don't want to recruit fast. Certain college coaches are like, we'll get to the kids when we get to them. Other schools fill it up right away. So no, there's no like, if you're not finding a home by January 1st, you're got. Now it may be, and I think this is probably where you're going with the question, Joe, is you may want to reevaluate who you're targeting. That's probably a fair statement. If you are focused, and again, this kind of is one of those things where I don't think people do this soon enough. It also goes into you should know where you are probably going to play at, or what your level should be before the recruiting process starts, because a lot of kids do this. They're like, I am going to be recruited D1, and nothing happens until the 1st. Nothing happens until January, and they're like, nobody wants me. Like, no, people want you. Those people don't.
Yeah.
But there's all these other people who would love to have you. Yeah. And that's where you have the pivot, where you see these kids pivoting, and they're like, oh, wow, everything changed. Like, yeah, you start talking to people who, are recruiting players like you, and that's not an insult.
No.
It's just, it is. It is what it is. So I think that's what happened. I think you see a pivot happen with some kids where they're just like, especially if they're very narrow focused when they start. And I always say be very wide when you start out, as far as maybe a little D3, there's so many good D3 programs. Some of the D3 programs, some D2 that are strong, and then some D1s. That's okay. Nice broad range of it. And then you can kind of feel, you're getting a lot of calls from the D3 guys and not a lot from the D1 and maybe a sprinkling of the D2s. Okay, that gives you an idea because coaches tend to recruit in areas. Like you'll get recruited by all the Liberty League schools in D3, or maybe you're a Big Ten type player, and they kind of all will start fixating on you if you have those set of skills. So if you're only getting recruited by D3s, you're probably a D3 player.
It's like diversifying your portfolio. You
100%.
can't just go blue chip stocks all day long. You're not gonna, they fail. You're kind of screwed.
Absolutely. So I think that's the thing. I think that the pivoting occurs. I don't think that you should look at it and say, if a certain date comes, I'm not going to get recruited. I think that just means you have to open up your view. Like I said, there's a place for everyone. There are programs looking for players right now. And the season's starting in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
there's
crazy.
schools that have 21 kids on their roster right now.
Would you say always better to just start more broad and then narrow as you go?
I do think I think you should try to understand what you want, right? Because being broad and being like, I got recruited by a bunch of schools that are in the middle of the city, and I don't want to ever live in a city. That's not important.
Still within your.
Yeah, I still think you want to be like, okay, I'm gonna talk to some D3s, some D2s, D1s, and kind of feel it out. Especially if you're a decent low level, mid level D1 player, and you could maybe wing a spot on a high NESCAC or an RIT or a Salisbury or a York. Those are really good lacrosse teams who are Christopher Newport, RPI. You're going to have a really great experience there, and you're going to be a leader on that team versus maybe being the 10th recruit at Lemoyne.
Yeah. Just shifting to some more physical prepared stuff, which we did touch on in the sort of the early, recruiting process of what coaches are looking for in terms of like having some size, but being more, explosive and fast and be able to create space. But in today's recruiting landscape, how do coaches weigh physical tools like the size, speed, strength against lacrosse skill?
Well, like we talked about it earlier, I think the key here is you have to have whatever that coach is. And it's really important to understand that there are coaches who are like, I will not have a defender who's under 6'2". Right? That was the old Virginia thing. Virginia was always 6'4" defenseman. If you were a tall guy, even if you were weak in skills, they wanted you because they could hang a lot of meat on you and make you a big, strong kid. So every coach has whatever they think is the minimum requirements for their school as far as athleticism, as far as height, weight, quickness, explosiveness, shooting ability. They want that. And until you're over that mark, they're not going to talk to you. And all the other skills do take a second. But once you cross that line, then all those intangibles really do kick in. And that differentiates the players from each other once you get over that. Because there are still a lot of players when you get over that line. But I think that, there are certain coaches where you have to be have to be the big, strong monster kid. Or they really like shifty attackmen. They really want defense, or they want attackmen who draw slides, take physical abuse. They want guys who just will back you down. So whatever it is, and it depends. And this is the big thing, and we go over it all the time on the channel, is there is no one size fits all. It depends on the coach. It depends on the level. It depends on what the system they're running, and that's going to determine it. So there's no but look, if you're going to be 6'5", 240 pounds and run a 4.2, it's probably going to be home for you. But everybody else, you just got to get over that limit, whatever that line is. Get over that line, and they'll talk to you.
And the reason I brought it up again too is it just may help when you are needing to pivot and make another decision from your original one. Is these other elements of what goes into the team come up again. So it's like good to revisit those things, like, does this type of program or this type of division work well for where I am currently or where I want to be? And just kind of revisiting when that pivot moment happens, revisit those other elements that come back in. Don't forget why you chose that top school. And then what do these other schools have? Are they similar, or, how do you fit into that picture?
I tell everyone who I live in Rochester, New York. I tell everyone, go watch RIT play lacrosse. Go over there and just look at how monstrous these kids are. They're giants. And they're a Division III, a very strong Division III team. They won 2 national championships in the last 10 years or so. And I think seeing any of these teams, go watch your local D3 team play. Go there and watch, and you realize how physical this game is, how fast this game is, and how athletic these players are. And that's a great, because you can sit there, and I've seen faces of some of my friends, my son's friends at these games, and they go, oh, I thought this wasn't very good lacrosse. Like, no. No. This is very good lacrosse. This is just D3. I didn't think they were that good. No, they're very good. And it kind of resets it because they're like, oh, it's D3. I can play D3. I was a fifth attackman on my team. I can play D3. Like, no, in most cases, no. But going and seeing some of these teams play live, and because you can see them on film and kind of, you're watching a YouTube or a stream of a game, it kind of, the distance and everything kind of makes things look a little, like, you go and sit in the sidelines where they're 5 yards onto the field, and you quickly realize that if you want to play at any level in college, it's fast and it's extremely physical. And that's a little eye-opener for some people.
Yeah, it's probably becomes a really obvious gap, especially, if you're junior year of high school and you're looking at, like, they're grown men really out there. They've had 3 more years of developing through high school. They've had whatever, year they're in at university to develop, and most of those guys will develop a lot in first year, which is like perfect transition here because, there's more flexibility than ever. So this is where we get into reclassing, the JUCO route, development years, or the portal. How should families think about these options?
Oh, let's take the easy one first.
Yeah, that was 5 very different options, but
I'm going to stay away from the third rail because I need a little pump up on my viewership, I'll do something on reclassing, and that it always, because everyone loses their minds on it. So let's take a step back. Let's talk about the portal, because people are treating the portal like it's the reset button. Oh, I don't like it here. This coach is mean, or whatever. Enter the portal and everything. There was, on the men's side, there's a portal in the middle of the year now, right before the season starts. So it starts in December 15th, I think, something like that. And it goes until a little while ago. And it allows a person to go through fall ball, figure out if they're going to do well. And if they don't like it, they can hop in the portal mid-season and jump to another team. There were 19 kids in the boys' side. 19 kids entered the portal mid-season. 4 found homes.
Yeah.
And there's also a portal for grad students. If you're going to you have a 5th year, and you can go in the portal at that point whenever. And there's 28 kids who want to play next year with their 5th year. And as of today, and it's a little bit slower, so it's probably a misleading number, 3 have found homes.
Right.
So people keep thinking this portal is so magical because they see the football, they see all the people, but they don't talk about the thousands of kids in the portal who never find homes.
Right.
So once you enter the portal, you're done. Most programs, you're done. You enter the portal, you forfeit your scholarship, you are off the team, you're not part of the team, you're not lifting with them. Now, some coaches will allow you to test the waters in the portal, and they're kind of cool about it. They are exceptions to the rules. They are not the normal. Normally, it's, you don't want to play for us? Great. Good luck.
Yeah.
Close the door on your way out. So, there was a lot of movement on the women's side. I think it was 24 out of the 32 girls who entered the mid-season portal found homes. But that's the nature of the women's game. There's being
more
so
programs,
many more teams.
Yeah.
And so the portal's not the end-all, be-all. And it's scary that people think that they'll just jump ship and it'll be easy for them.
Well, becomes public, right? Like, it's pretty loud declaration that you don't want to be on that in that program anymore. And you could definitely see how coaches would, just be done with you at that point. You've made it really clear you don't want to be here.
And what happens let's say that you lose your scholarship. In most cases, you lose your scholarship. You're alienated from your teammates, your 40 brothers or sisters that you came there with, and do you stay in that school? Let's say you don't find a home to play lacrosse. Do you stay there? And you have to leave because you don't have the money anymore. You have to make the decision to go in the portal. And look, there's a lot of good reasons for it. I mean, you look at the women's side, the Colgate nonsense that was happening there where the coach was a lunatic. There were a lot of girls who just bailed on that program, and that was a really good reason to use the portal.
Yeah, totally.
But there's a lot of people choosing the portal because it's hard or they don't like it or, it's not what they were. And it's fine. It's a reasonable reason. If you're not happy, don't stay somewhere. But understand that that's not a guarantee you're going to go somewhere. So I really tell people I've had parents say, well, if I don't like it, we'll switch. We'll just go out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a quick, fast decision. You definitely want to think long and hard of that. I think probably what a lot of people think of it too is like free agency. Like as a pro athlete, you're like, I'm coming up as a free agent. I'm going to just get picked up by some other team because I'm a pro. But
there's a lot of them out there.
Those numbers are scary. Like 3 people got picked up out of whatever you said, 24, 28. That's a good reason to think long and hard about what your decision is going to be, especially for, a young guy who's maybe facing some adversity and challenging questions for the first time. You're the best kid in your city and all of a sudden you get to a whatever program and the coach says you're not as good as you think, and that hurts, and you think, oh, I'll just pull the parachute here and get out.
Yeah, and remember this, it works both ways. If you're, there are kids who are going going D3, good D3, and or low level D1, and their entire goal is to become all conference at in the CA. CA is pretty good in whatever conference, and then get out, kind of move up. So you're not competing. You're not as a recruit, as a high school recruit. You're not competing against other high school kids. You're also competing against all the kids who were playing D3 last year who are ready to move up and jump into D1. So the whole recruiting, building a team from a coach's perspective is turned over on itself. It's like I have a choice now. I can take a 22-year-old kid who has maybe 1 or 2 years of eligibility, or I can take an 18-year-old kid who may or may not work out. He may or may not have a work ethic. He may or may not have the skills. So there's a lot of things going on right now. So let's go on the hard one, which is the one, the reclassing.
Yeah,
that one that's a third rail for me. That one is really tough because if you look at the results, if you look at the top 100 for the last 3 or 4 years in inside lacrosse from a recruiting perspective, from a high school recruiting perspective, the majority of those kids are prep kids. At the top of the pyramid, they are all reclass kids because they're bigger and they're stronger and they're more mature and all the things you'd expect for a kid who gets to have an extra year of life.
Yeah.
But I think what people don't understand is these kids are good before they reclass.
Right.
So like James Holborough, who was the number 1 recruit in the 27 class. He's going to go to UNC, part of that unbelievable recruiting class they had this year. My son played with him for years on the club team. He lives the next town over. He was probably, being conservative, he was probably a top 5 attackman as a 26. Probably top 5. And then he reclassed, and he became the number 1 overall recruit.
Right.
So he was taking a base that was really, really good and then really leveraged that year to lift and eat and work on the few holes he had in his game. And he just filled in, the rough edges and became that. It's not like, and this is where people get frustrated, is like they think, oh, he was a terrible player, went to prep school, and then became a fantastic. No. The clay was already half molded, and they just finished it off. Right, that's the difference. So I think that, you used to see a few kids go to prep school and reclass, and it was okay. Maybe they were early birthday, or they were undersized. They're late bloomers. That's the term. And then they went and did that, or they were just a family thing. That my father and his father went to Eton and whatever. And that's kind of changed now, where it's almost people are talking about reclassing in prep school as like the only way you can get into college. And I don't think that is true, because not everyone has the skill set to begin with. That clay you started with still has to be really good. And then, obviously another year working on it makes you better. But if you're a really good player and you're in public school and you graduate and you play, you're going to get recruited also. But it's one of those things where I think there's so much hype now about prep school is the way. Look at all the success that XYZ player had because they spent an extra year. And I don't think it's true. My kids did not reclass. They were, all three of them were, public school, high school, graduated on age and are playing.
Yeah, and again, like the other highlights that we've talked about, it's like the top story gets highlighted, but there's thousands of stories of guys who maybe went that route and didn't move up in their rankings. They probably developed better, they probably got stronger in that time period, but the likelihood that they went from top 5 to the number 1 pick, that's only happened.
To that point, there was a player in my area, a long time ago, very good player, extremely good player. And he got recruited to Marist, good program, Red Foxes. I like that program a lot. He got recruited them out of high school, and they decided that a PG year, he could go PG and then kind of raise his stock and end up maybe going somewhere better. He was a good player. Now, he was a smaller statured player, right? So maybe he grows a little bit. So he goes to Salisbury. I think it was Salisbury. And he kills it at Salisbury, right? He's all league, all prep, whatever the titles are. And when he finished up there, he went to Marist because that's the level of lacrosse he was at. Even though he still had, he was still a smaller player and everything else, but he was an extremely good player. Went on to Marist and had a fantastic career there. Now, did it hurt him? No. Going to prep school didn't hurt him. He probably became more mature, learned how to live on his own with a little bit of oversight, as opposed to being in the dorm room at the college. So there was benefits above and beyond the lacrosse, but he did not improve he was where he was when he got out. It was the same place. Yeah. So, that's why I say you have to, it's not magic. They'll let you, I think they use the term, the prep schools, and I'll maybe get you closer to your ceiling. You still have a ceiling. This is the best you're ever going to be. Most people never get even close to that. Maybe they get to 80% of their ceiling. Maybe prep school allows you to get to 90% of your ceiling. Yeah. But your ceiling is still whatever that ceiling is. It doesn't help you raise your ceiling. That's how I think about it.
Yeah. With parents, coaches, and recruiting relationships, you've said recruiting works best when parents and coaches are aligned. From your view, what behaviors help players and what quietly hurt them?
It's a tough one. I said that? Okay. So what behaviors from a player perspective?
From the parents being aligned with the coaches.
Parents really have to learn to just go away. And I really mean that, because we are, as parents, and I'm a parent first, right? We're terrible at evaluating talent. And we're terrible at understanding what they're trying to accomplish from a team perspective. Very few parents have honest conversations with their kids. They end up, ganging up on coaches. They hear one side of the story. They don't. I think that if you're going to if you want your kid to be as successful as possible, you have to trust the person you're giving your kid over to somebody, and you have to trust that they know what they're doing. And they may do things that you don't like, and there may be decisions you don't like, and you need to just go away. I really think a lot of parents are the 95% of the problems of youth sports today, because we're either trying to capture a glory we never had, or we think we're smarter than we are, or my local high school coach has a great saying. He tells it every year. I've been in the high school program in my area for 12 years. Like I've had a kid in the program for 12 years straight. So I've heard this story like 12 times, probably more than that. He talks about his mother was a hairdresser. So he would be after school going into the beauty parlor where she worked, and he would sweep up and kind of just do his homework there. And that's where he would be a lot. So he says, I've seen a million perms, I've seen a million dye jobs on hair, and I've seen people cut hairs for forever. You do not want me doing any of those things, right? Because even though I've watched it over and over and over, I'm not an expert in it. And he says that about the parents. Is like, I know you've seen a lot of games, and I've known you watched a lot of on TV. It's not the same thing. You have to trust me in this process, in that I know what we're doing. So I think if you're going to be a parent in this whole thing, it's best to just enjoy the games. I tell people all the time, enjoy it. It's going to go away, and you're not going to have it. And if you're going to go through life complaining and crying and making everyone around you miserable because you're bitching and moaning about the decisions or the pass or the coaching timeout or whatever it is, you're not going to enjoy it. You're going to make everyone around you not enjoy it, and then it's going to be gone. Yeah. It's going to be gone, and you can't get it back. So just shush and enjoy it. That's my advice to all parents. It's
That's
hard.
great.
It's hard.
That's good advice, especially from someone who's had 3 boys go through it.
2 boys and a girl.
Oh, sorry, 2 boys and a girl. Apologies. So a bit of a bonus question, just kind of topical. What impact, if any, do you think the Olympics will have on college lacrosse programs, especially with the first Olympics being hosted in the U.S.?
I think this is a great topic. My daughter has been playing with Team Ireland as a goalie for a little bit. Just and I don't know what's going to become of it, if that's going to kind of pan out and she'll end up doing it. But so I have a good exposure to the sixes game, and I don't know if it's necessarily going to change anything in the college game, but I think it's going to change things, especially in the non-hotbed areas. These places that are becoming much more enriched with lacrosse. You know, the East Kentuckys and these, you know, Midwest places where lacrosse, maybe you can't get 12 on or 11 on 10 on 10 or 12 on 12 for the girls. Sixes becomes this fantastic alternative, and it's going to get a lot of attention. And I think we're going to see a lot of growth at the youth level because it's so much easier to put a tournament on with sixes because you smaller fields and you can get more teams and games are shorter and they're faster going. I think we're going to see a little change in that perspective. I think sixes is a great game. I'm not a huge fan of it from the guy's perspective. I'm much more of a field guy or a box guy. Sixes for the boys always feels like it's a. I'd rather watch them play box. We're going to have a short field, but that's my own opinion. But for the girls, sixes is fantastic. Sixes is, I mean, I know there's a lot of box for women now. Girls are playing box, especially in Canada, but it's not as prevalent. I think you're going to see the youth programs embrace it. It's just easier to put it on, and I think there's going to be a tremendous growth there. And then that style eventually will make its way up into the college ranks. But I think we're going to see after the Olympics or on the lead up to the Olympics an excitement for this very fast-paced, very exciting, quick goal scoring game, and I think we're going to see a huge growth in that, especially in non-hotbed areas, because it's just easier to do.
Yeah, that's cool insight. I think what was really cool at the women's worlds was such a great expression of the women's box game and how much it has improved, especially, you know, in the last 20 years. But those girls were impressive to watch at the world level. I agree with you with the sixes, especially with the men's side. It becomes like a bit of a shootout game because guys can just bomb it from 20 yards out, and you know it's a quick turnaround. It would be curious to see, like, especially with some programs constricting their funding, like they don't have as much funding, if there became sort of a secondary opportunity for those schools to have sixes programs where they could run tournaments around the country. and not have to carry a 40-team roster. They could carry an 18-team roster and actually travel around with smaller groups and still be able to play, still have the fun of the sport, but potentially develop some players that could play at the world level.
I think that's a very interesting idea. I would love to see that happen. I mean, more opportunities to play lacrosse would be great. But yeah, I think you're going to see a change. It's going to be slow. It's going to be slow, but I think we could definitely see that. I just think that the game, when people see sixes, if you're not a lacrosse guy and you watch sixes, you get pulled into it. That's what I say. If you go watch a box game, you can't take your eyes off it. It's so much fun. I'm a huge box guy. I mean, being right on the other side of the border, it makes it easier for me to enjoy box. But when you see a field game sometimes, it can be a little boring.
Depending on the style.
I love it.
Depending on the style.
But it can be a little boring. But you don't get that in sixes. It's boom, 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 boom. And I think people are going to really grab on to that.
I think so too. For the Olympics, like the audience that is the total layman, they maybe have never even heard of it, to see this fast, exciting version of it will draw people in, and then it'll expose them to different versions of it as well.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. So I've got one final question for you. For people listening who want to learn more or work with you, how can they connect with you?
Best way is Laxdad Recruiting on TikTok and on Instagram, where I try to post every day. I am also available through DMs, so people who have questions. I don't have a service. I am not charging anyone any fees. I do everything because 1 million people helped me along this journey, so I try to return it. I'm trying to pay it forward. So, I'm always happy to answer questions or help you figure out if an email is really real or not, or all that kind of stuff. So look me up on both TikTok and on Instagram.
Love that. And I highly recommend the follow, especially if you are an athlete or a parent who's trying to navigate these muddy waters and get your kids to a school and get a good education out of it. We will always put in the show notes how people can connect with you and give some direct links to both those social medias.
Great.
Awesome, Dennis. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. We had a nice long conversation, covered lots of topics, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
If this episode brought you clarity, whether you're navigating recruiting, business decisions, or just trying to think long-term instead of reacting short-term, do me a favor and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're getting value from the podcast, I really appreciate a 5-star review. If you're listening on Spotify, just tap the show name, hit the 3 dots, and select Rate Show. It takes about 10 seconds. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, scroll to the bottom of the show, tap Write a Review, and leave a quick 5-star review rating. Those reviews genuinely help me and the show grow and reach more high performers just like yourself. A quick thank you to our podcast partners, Whoop, ATP Labs, Trainerize, Cala Red Light, and Bioptimizers. You'll find all links and discount details in the show notes. I appreciate you all being here, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you everyone for hanging in for the full episode. I appreciate you all. Quick reminder about the brands that make this podcast possible and the offers that you can take advantage of. These are products I use daily and they help me perform at my best, recover faster, and stay on top of my game. Coaches, you know how hard it is to juggle clients' programs, progress tracking, and communicate. I've been there too. After years of grinding it out, I finally found Trainerize. It brings everything I need for coaching into one platform. Whether I'm onboarding new clients, scaling my business, or keeping people accountable, it just works. I've tried other platforms over the years, but for the last 3 years, Trainerize has been my go-to. It's easy for me to grow and for my clients to stay consistent. If you're a coach looking for flexibility and simplicity, check it out. Use the link in the show notes to get your first month with Trainerize for free. Here's the thing. Good sleep and recovery aren't optional, especially if you're trying to train hard, stay sharp, and keep up with life. That's why I use Bioptimizers. Magnesium Breakthrough and Sleep Breakthrough have been game changers for me. I've tried other products, but these ones deliver. High quality ingredients and noticeable results. If you want better sleep, digestion, or recovery, Bioptimizers fills the gaps your diet can't. Trust me, you'll feel the difference. Use the link in the show notes and the code 3phase10 to get 10% off your order. I used to stress about getting perfect sleep, and ironically, it ruined my sleep. That's when I started using Whoop. Whoop gave me clear insights on my recovery, strain, and sleep patterns, so I stopped guessing and started optimizing. It created a positive feedback loop for better sleep, better decisions, and better training. If you want to train smarter and recover better, Whoop is the tool you need. Use the link in the show notes and get the device and your first month with Whoop for free. Nutrition is the foundation of performance. That's why I trust ATP Labs. From Supreme Beef to MyoPrime Creatine and Pure Essential Amino Acids, these products fill the gaps in my nutrition and help me recover faster, train harder, and perform at my best. ATP Labs uses high-quality ingredients you can feel good about, and you'll feel the difference. If you're serious about fueling your performance, check them out. Use the link in the show notes and the code 3phase10 to get 10% off of your orders. Thanks for sticking it out through the ads, and we'll see you on the next episode.